on. Anyway, for those of you that are uncertain who I am, I'm William Stockdale, Chair of Thornton-le-Street History Group. Good evening to Claire Lyons. Tonight's presentation, we have James Lyall, and James is going to look at how local and community archaeology groups can carry out geophysical surveys and see if these were successful. Successful would be brilliant. We've had some geophysical surveys here and we think they were successful. So this is going to be quite an interesting talk. And also, this is a bit of a joke really, whether you might be able to find Roman roads using these techniques. Well, we've tried, but we haven't found any yet, but we're still looking. Okay, so if you have any questions, please, as always, type them into the Q&A box. Only use chat if there's an obvious technical issue that you don't think we are aware of. We do want lots of questions, please, because this is a community project. We are time limited as always, so even though you might ask a question, it just might not get answered, but we'll do our very, very best. I'm now going to hand you over to James.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill, for that. I'm just going to get myself set up here. Mike Haken is there, who might be speaking to you. In the background is Bootham Hospital, which used to be the York Lunatic Asylum. Now, I'm not going to say any more about that other than doing community archaeology and geophysics. Sometimes I think I'm going to end up in one of those, but never mind. Right. When I was thinking about doing this talk, I wondered how am I going to do that? How do we define what success is? How would you define whether your survey with your community group has been successful? So I've come up with a number of options. Initially, you could be doing a survey and someone's just going to stick their head over the fence and say, well, are you with the time team then? Because we get that a lot, which is fine because you can engage with them and tell them what you're doing. But in all honesty, that's not really doing geophysics. Then you get a local group who are assisting in carrying out a survey. So they're setting out grids, moving ropes, helping you doing all of that, but they're not actually conducting the survey at this stage. Thirdly, we can learn how to conduct a survey under supervision. So this time you're actually using the machine. So you're walking up and down, carrying the machine or sticking it in the ground. Then the group can learn how to do the survey without me being there. So without the professional having to guide them all the time. And then the final one I would define as the Holy Grail. Full survey, interpretation, and the report writing with no supervision. And although that might seem very difficult to achieve, I've now currently got two groups who are in this stage. They are doing the interpretation and writing their reports for the first time. So it can be done, but it does take a little bit of effort. So I'm going to go through a number of case studies just to show how things can work and how they might not work. I started doing geophysical survey in 1993, but it wasn't until 2005 that I did my first sort of what could be classified as community archaeology work with geophysics. And that was in North Yorkshire in June, on the wettest June day in record. It was absolutely siling it down the whole time we were doing this. So we ended up doing, I'm not going to name this group for reasons which will become obvious. We ended up doing about 3 grids, which I did most of the walking for. And then I left the machine with them. Then after a couple of weeks, I got sent this back, which was the next 2 grids. Now, as you can see, there's something clearly gone wrong there. And I suspect it was to do with dummy logging, but not being there was very difficult to work out exactly what had gone wrong. About a year later, we needed to go and get the machine back. So I went back to get it and discovered they hadn't done any more work. And that was because the person who had the machine had fallen out with the rest of the group. And so that, I think we could say, was certainly unfulfilled potential. But later on, I discovered that York University went to that site, did a little bit more, and in fact did quite a lot more around the area. And they were actually looking for Roman kilns, but managed to find a chariot burial. So That's a sort of case to be very wary of interpreting geophysical results, because there are certainly things that can come up and bite you when you least expect them to. Then I did in 2011 a leader-funded project at Weaverthorpe, which was to use resistivity and magnetometry over the site. So this is the resistivity here. I've made the arrow big so you can see it. This is the magnetometry. In terms of public participation, not quite as successful as we would have hoped, because I managed to get a workplace student from the local school to help me with this one, the local secondary school. But for this, we were going to get the primary school, which is located just off to the side here, children to come and help me do this resistivity survey. So I went in and gave a talk in the morning, and then we all went out and I set the grid out, and we did 2 lines of resistivity, and it started drizzling very slightly, and they all ran back into the school, and that was that. So it is quite interesting. I want you to note here something though. This area is completely different from the rest of it, and that's all down to the conditions. So resistivity is very susceptible to or prone to being difficult when it's wet or when it's dry. So you will not get the same results all year round, unlike magnetometry. Unlike magnetometry, it will work in all weathers. And yes, I'm afraid that is me in the snow, pushing the machine. So the machine will work, you might feel miserable, but the results are never affected by weather or conditions, unlike resistivity. Then Peter Holkin invited me to take part in a Heritage Lottery funded project, an Unburnham Village one. So it's very similar in a sense to your Thornton one, where they were looking at the local history and the buildings, but one part of it was to do some geophysics. So as you can see here, it's slightly more successful. There's quite a lot of people interested. We did 2 training days like this. You can see we're pushing the cart. If you look at this carriageway here, and this is something. Can you walk in a straight line? The first line was mine, and then I started getting the other participants to walk. It's not as easy as you might imagine, even when you have a GPS. It was successful to an extent. In the end, we did about 80 hectares here, I believe, but not so successful in that it was me that did the 80 hectares, because once the 2 days had gone, most of the other people didn't really want to be doing that, pushing that cart up and down in the middle of winter, which is when we had to get to these fields. So it was a very nice result. As you can see, we did some trenches across here. So that again was successful. We had people from the village coming to help us dig. This big blob here in the middle, that was an old quarry pit. And in fact, we were told that the farmer's father in the 1960s, when it was filled, had put a Triumph Herald in there. So that's a sort of modern Yorkshire chariot burial for you. My next attempt was at Opton Village, funded by Place, which was good because we got the money to do it. But what I hadn't realised was that I wasn't allowed to get paid for it. So I ended up losing money on this one, although it was a successful outcome for everyone else. So this group wanted to go over the old deserted church at Opton Village with the resistivity meter, and I decided I would do magnetometry as well. So here's me with the magnetometer going across the church, which you can see still exists as 2 little bumps in the ground. And here you can see the church. This is the resistivity survey. So successful in the extent that certainly the group learned how to use the resistivity meter, but not so successful in that I did all the magnetometry and I wrote the full report. So we move on to what I would term more successful outcomes. In 2016, in the middle of winter, up in the Dales at the Hidden Valleys Community Project. This doesn't look very exciting, but in fact it's a promontory hill ford. There are massive banks running around this area, and we were hoping to find anything inside it, which we didn't, apart from the odd pit. And this is the elaborate entrance way. You can just see some details of it here. The group certainly learnt over a number of days to use the magnetometer, and could certainly do that without me now. In 2018, the Roman Roads Research Association bought a magnetometer and GPS system for use with local community groups in mind. Certainly with the emphasis being on looking for Roman roads, but not specifically that. So if there's something else that really you want to survey, you need to get in touch with Mike Haken. But we'll go through, this machine has actually done 340 hectares since we got it, so it has been very busy. And I'm hoping to show you a few of the results from that in the next few minutes. FWAP, which is the Friday-Thorpe Fimber Wet Wang Archaeology Project, have been one of the beneficiaries of this machine, although they also use an old FM36, which is what I first learned on. And so the two can be combined. And I think I'm going to come back to this later on in the talk, because one of the problems about local community groups doing this kind of work is getting the machinery. That's one of the results. I'm going to come back to that later. I'm just going to go back. You can see that this is a beautiful result. That was all done with the FM18. That does not look so good. And when they first looked at this, they called me up and said, James, something's gone wrong with the machine. But in fact, this field is only a couple of fields away from the one you've just seen, and there's nothing wrong with the machine. What's happened here is green waste. So green waste has been spread on this field. And as you can see, green waste is clearly not as green as we might hope, because that is absolutely covered with metal. And I've been told that in some areas with green waste, there are even broken syringes mixed in with it. So that is a problem for magnetometry specifically. So there's FWAP's success. They've actually, that running total is now incorrect. It's probably got another 9 hectares on there. And so they've done over 129 hectares to date. But their target area is this nice brown blob, and the red ones are what's been achieved so far, although some of this has been done this week. So well done, FWAP. Petuaria Revisited has just started. They've only began sort of training in September last year, and we've been struggling because of COVID, but as you can see, we have some good results. I'm going to come back to this slide just so that you know that I'm not completely focused on the Romans. I do like a bit of prehistory as well. And the Tadcaster Historical Society, who are one of the first to take advantage of Mike's machine, or the Roman Road Research machine, has done a very impressive total of 197 hectares to date, so nearly at the 200 mark. This is the Roman fort at Rowcliffe, and that's the A1 running right past it there. So, how do we ensure that the outcome is successful, or how do we avoid failure? One, try to choose a sunny day. I mean, I know that sounds trite, but it really does make a difference if people are out in the pouring rain or if they're in a beautiful day. And so if they have nice memories of it, they're far more likely to come back and want to do it again. Choose a site which will give good returns, because many local community groups have areas which they want to look at, but they may not always be the areas which generate a good return. I've always discovered that if you can get people their wow factor when they first see the results appearing on the screen, it will ensure that they are much more likely to come back and keep going. If you keep finding nothing in a field, it really dampens spirits. You need an enthusiastic coordinator, most definitely, because I cannot run these things if I've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 going on at the same time. So you need someone from each group who can coordinate. Now, In the previous slide, you saw Alison. There's various things. They use Doodle, they use WhatsApp groups, they sort out when they're going to go out. And of course, you need the volunteers. You need people who want to come out and do this, sometimes in not so clement conditions. The equipment, okay. This is an important one. It's very difficult to get hold of magnetometers. They're expensive. The reason that most local community groups tend to use resistivity is just purely been because it's cheaper to purchase. It's not necessarily the best thing to use. Sometimes it will give you different results, and I'll show you an example of that later. But generally speaking, the workhorse of commercial geophysical surveyors is the magnetometer. You will use that as a matter of course initially, and then you might go on to resistivity or other methods later. So getting hold of equipment is the difficult part for most local community groups. And then it's the training. I sort of realized when I made this graph that what I classified as success was directly linked to how much time I'd been able to put into each group. So it's not the group's failure, it's my failure. The more time I can put in, the more days I can be there, the more times I can tell them how to deal with things when they go wrong, the more likely they are to keep going by themselves and be able to deal with that. So you can see the clear link between the number of my training days in blue and what I classify in my 5 levels of success. There's a direct correlation between those two. And then finally, continued mentoring over time. No matter how experienced the group gets, there's always going to be something that happens that they haven't come across before. So quite often I get a phone call in the middle of nowhere saying, James, something's gone wrong, what do I do? I said, you have to press this one. So it's not something you can just go and do a couple of days at and then give up. If you want the local groups to be successful, you have to give them enough training initially, and then you have to keep a continued mentoring until they are very confident about what they're doing. Okay, so yes, I'm sure some of you recognize that. That's your Thornton survey. I downloaded that from the web and georeferenced it for you. And yes, we're going to move into looking for Roman roads to the past. So, and why are they sometimes elusive or difficult to track down? We're back to this site again. I'm going to use Margary's classification for roads. This one's technically RR810, but we're not sure whether it's actually here or not. There is a green lane extending through here. This is a survey which is just completed this week by FWAP and comes through here. And that's where the Roman road from Stamford Bridge to Bridlington is supposed to run. And if we'd only done this much, we would be able to say, oh, that looks like we've got a Roman road. But in fact, there is a lot of lines running parallel to that one. So is it a Roman road? Is it a ditch relating to the green lane? Is it a medieval trackway? Or is it an Iron Age feature? Certainly, the unusual bit about this is the green lane marks the limit of these features. They don't extend to the south. So they appear to be man-made in that sense, rather than geological, which was my first thought. But do we have a Roman road there? I think we'd have to say the jury is still out on that one. I'm not going to show you a lot of failures tonight in terms of Roman roads because I've done loads, but in fact, there's nothing to show. You just don't see anything. But there was a case at one point when Mike said, if you don't want to find a road, get James to come on the survey, because I was like a jinx. Every time we tried to survey and find one, nothing was showing up. So let's look at a success story. This is Aldborough, Azurium Brigantum in North Yorkshire. I surveyed quite a lot of this for Martin Millett and Rose Ferraby around the Aldborough area, though Rose did a lot of the work within the town itself. And so I'll show you a bit of the town. There's the actual town itself, the defences but obviously there's a lot going on around it. The northern part of the town is quite interesting. You can see the buildings and the streets within it, but you can also see there are sort of areas which are quite empty. It's almost as if the town was laid out, but never quite filled in that sense. To the south, you have typical sort of Iron Age stroke Romano British type settlement with the curvy trackways and enclosures coming off of them. You can see the added defences here, these big ditches. Quite interesting here. Now, the road to the east, which comes down here, that's one reason you don't find Roman roads, because we've put our roads on top of them. They're actually very handy. Normally, they're going from one place to another. That's what they do. And so we tend to want to go to those same places. So our roads follow theirs. But there are some interesting things to note here. There are these mausoleums just outside the town, here and here. You were not allowed to bury anyone within the town walls in a Roman town or city. So they would tend to be found just outside the town or on the roads on the way out, which you can see here. This may be another one, although it does look suspiciously like a square barrow. That's very unlikely here in Brigantian territory. So up to the north, we're going to go back to roads. The road itself comes out, I'm going to show you, comes out of the town here and takes a little curve up. Couldn't survey this bit, unfortunately, because that's a sewage farm. Then the road continues up that way. So it comes out here and then takes a little turn as it approaches the river. Now, whether the river was where it is today or whether it was here, we don't know. So there would have been a bridge of some description across it here. And then once you get across the river, you can see hints of other roads. So we're just going to a bit of a closer look there. The one to the west is a Roman road 8B, which is a Deer Street in effect. So you can see here near the river, probably because of alluvial action, nothing remains. But further away, you can see this is what you would normally want to see for your Roman road, a nice classic pair of ditches running in a nice straight line. On the other side, we have that, but you will note that here the ditches are closer together, and that is something to remember about Roman roads. They are not all created equal. It depends on when they were made, who made them, and what they were made for. So if we imagine all Roman roads in Britain to be the same, we are going to be disappointed. The military roads are the ones that are the most classic, the ones we tend to think of as Roman roads. But certainly there were other roads than that. And if you are going to get Mike to speak to your group, then I'm not going to say any more than that, because he knows much more about that than me. So that is potentially, as you can see, the lost road to Malton. Now, a bit further to the south of Aldborough, right, where is the road? There is supposed to be a road running through this site. You can see a nice Romano-British settlement here. I will put you out of your misery. The road is supposed to be there. But if I go back, there is not the vaguest hint of it in our magnetic survey. But in the field here, just to the north, another survey was done. This is not my survey. This was done by Nick Wilson, who is a local farmer and also a PhD student at York University. Here, you again get the nice classic ditch shape. You get the two ditches running parallel lines, which is what you would expect. But then look, they fade away. They fade away before they get to the field that we were looking at. So we go back to our field, absolutely nothing to see. There is no doubt the road is there because we excavated it. So we did some resistivity survey, or should I say Mike Turpin and a group of willing volunteers did a lot of survey, and this is what they came up with. So here you can see a little bit more than the magnetics was changing. This is a hint of something that might be a road, but then they change alignment or something goes funny. You seem to have three of them there. Up here, we have a much more classic two ditch and a nice low resistance in the middle. So here we have resistivity doing more than magnetics, and I'm not going to go into why all these techniques work. If somebody wants to ask me that as a question, I can do that. That's not a problem, but that's almost a whole other talk in its own right. This is Toulston. This was done by the Tadcaster group. Where is the road? So you can see here, we have one road coming in there and one road. This is Google Earth and enhanced image. So I've stretched this to make them slightly more obvious. But when you look at the geophysical survey, you see something different. Clearly, we have sort of Iron Age, Romano-British, prior to the roads, a system existing here. But the roads are not visible as ditches, but they are visible as lines of quarry pits. So you can see the quarry pits there and there for that road, there and there for that road. And what was very unusual with this one is we found a new road. This road was not known before. So these lines of quarry pits are what are defining the road. And the quarry pits next to the road were used to build up the material. So the Romans did not bring in stone from miles around to build their roads. They used whatever was available right next to it. And so sometimes you don't see that beautiful two ditches, but if you see two parallel lines of quarry pits, that's as good as telling you that's where the road is. So, Brough to Stamford Bridge. This was something that was seen on Google Earth. I'm looking at this. I'm going to show you a slightly enhanced view now. And what that looks like is possibly the corner of a Roman fort. And maybe, is this a road heading there? The common belief is that the Roman road from Brough heads out underneath Cave Road here. So survey was done. We haven't done the whole field yet, but here we can see that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, because the edge of the Roman fort clearly is not that. It's part of a trackway that comes in, comes up, goes around there, heads off in that direction. The Roman road we were looking at is clearly not that either. There was then a belief that the Roman road was here. So we see these two parallel lines here and here, but again, that's incorrect, because that is an old field boundary. The one to the east and the one to the west is a drain. The road is actually just here, although we haven't done that bit yet, but I can show you. Get back to this slide. Here, the lovely prehistoric monument. It's very unusual, but here is the road. Look, the quarry ditches there. So this is two fields to the south of the one you've just seen. So the road deviates from South Cave Road just a bit, but not by much. Interestingly, these monuments are quite unusual in that they're almost certainly Bronze Age or Middle Bronze Age. Normally, with these ones with the entrance in them, the entrance points to the southeast like this, but these seem to be pointing to the northeast, which is very unusual. And you have this group of weird pits and much smaller ones, so that there's an intriguing field, and we would have surveyed the rest of this field, but unfortunately both COVID and the farming regime beat us to it. So we will get back to this one hopefully later this year. A little bit further north of that, the Roman road was supposed to run just about here, up through, just in between those houses and this bit. In fact, we found it about 40 to 50 meters away from where it was supposed to be. So here again, only defined by the line of quarry pits running up there and then running up there. And then look, when you get further south, those quarry pits are no longer visible. This is a much wetter area, which may explain that. But it just goes to show that you can find a Roman road. If we'd been looking for the Roman road in this field, we would not have found it. It's only because we extended the survey and went beyond where we thought it should be that we discovered its actual location. So, just to recap quickly, why are some of these roads so elusive? One, they are located under modern roads. You're never going to find them by any means if they're under a modern road. The makeup of the road or ditch fill is not detectable. Okay, that is a geophysical character. It's if the thing is filled with something that's exactly the same as what's outside it, no form of geophysics is going to find it. It's just it's never going to be detectable, even if it exists. So you could do your surveys, say it's not there, dig a hole and discover, there's all the ditches. Thirdly, the road is not where it is believed to be. As you've seen, quite often Roman roads are not exactly where they're marked on the map. So what used to happen, and certainly the first Roman maps, the Roman roads maps, are not that dissimilar from modern ones, apart from what Mike is doing with the Roman Roads Research Association. They tended to draw straight lines between bits where they were known. And that's not always the case. Roman roads are not always as straight as you might believe. They would wiggle around if they needed to go around something. They're not going to go right up and down a hill if they don't have to. So as you could see with South Cave, that was a 50-meter discrepancy. I believe some of them are even further away than that. So you have to survey quite a long way away and beyond where you believe it to be, just to make sure that it is where it's supposed to be. And fourthly, the road does not exist at all, as the one potentially in Fridaythorpe is. Although the road may be there, it also might not. I mean, they were all initially done in the 17 and 1800s when antiquarians were wondering where all the roads led, where they went, and lines were drawn all over the place. And they often become sort of fixed in stone once a map's been created. But there are a number of things that could happen. The road might not be there. The road might be a medieval road, which was misconstrued as a Roman one. The road could be an Iron Age road, which was used by the Romans, but was never in terms of what we might call a classic Roman road. And so these are all the reasons that you may not find your Roman roads by geophysics, and there are probably more. I'm just about getting to my last slide now, which is this one. Because this is going out live and because it's going to be recorded, I haven't showed the young lady's face, but she's one of the Hidden Valleys Community Project's volunteers, and she was 9 at the time that this survey was done. You can see we were using grids here, not the cart machine, and so you have to walk at a constant pace with this one. She insisted on doing the whole grid herself. There were 30-meter grids, and that's quite hard. As you can see, the machine's nearly as big as she is at that point. She held it up well. And she's one of the few people who came up to me and said, I could see the numbers changing when I went over that little bump. That's very rare, that someone can keep walking at an even pace and then keep looking at the numbers. Normally, only the professionals can do that. So I think on that note, I would classify that as a success worthy of finishing on. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope I can answer any of your questions through Pan. So I'm going to now, if you will wait a moment, I will try and pass over to Pan and let her take over.
Right, well, thank you very much for that, James. We've got a question asking about your views on archaeology done by private companies and the fact that they don't always make the results available.
Okay.
So, you know, and it just ends up in grey literature and so on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there are two things there. Basically, it's not that they're not making them available. It's just that there have been hold-ups to them becoming available. And so in theory, they should all be available on the ADS. In practice, what has to happen is that, up until now, that is that the local HER has to agree them first. So they have to be vetted, if you like, before they're allowed to go onto to the ADS. And because local HERs have been so depleted in the past few years, where they might have had 6 people, now they've got 2, they just do not have the time and resources to go through all of these, to vet them, to let them go out. And so I believe that OASIS is now going to change that. And so there's now going to be a default value, so that anything that goes into OASIS after 6 months, whether it's been okayed or not, is going to be allowed to go straight onto the ADS. So hopefully everything that's been done should make it on to the ADS with a 6-month gap. But we will wait and see how that works.
Right. What's been your most unexpected finding from magnetometry?
Oh, crikey, now you're asking. Unexpected finding. I always expect the unexpected, to be honest. I think is because you never know what you're going to find. That's the joy of it. I mean, I started off as an archaeologist. That's what I did. I'm a dirt digger, but I got into geophysics quite early, and now I almost prefer it because, to me, looking at the results every night, so I get home, I download the data, and I look at it. That's like finding a special find. When you find something no one's ever seen for thousands of years, it's always unexpected. And so they're all, not my babies, I think that's the wrong word, but they're all really intriguing. And sometimes there's nothing, and it's disappointing. But sometimes you think, oh my God, look at that. I think possibly I'm looking at one on my wall now that was unexpected. I won't say where it is, but it's in the East Riding. It was a double-ditched enclosure, presumed Bronze Age, Iron Age, but we went and did a survey with a student up there, and right in the middle of it was a massive roundhouse with a big things that posts all around it, and it completely unexpected, just like Thwing. And so I suppose in recent years that would be my most unexpected find. It was a real wow moment.
Right, there's a couple of questions about working with communities. What would your tips be for working with communities, especially if they don't have any archaeological experience? Yeah,
okay. So, well, I suppose it depends on whether they want to do digging or if we're talking about geophysics now. The first thing is you need to have the equipment. And that is always been the issue. It's been a big bugbear of mine trying to get equipment for local community groups, because I had to, I mean, the two FM36s that the FWAP group used were donated. One from someone I talked to do geophysics, PCA archaeology, and the other one was Dominic Palsland's one. Once he learned that they were doing a lot of work, he gave his one so that they could use that. Clearly, the Roman Roads Research Association one is available, but that does require training. So you can't just turn up, give them the equipment and say, there you are, off you go, here's the manual. You have to stay there and train them. So there's obviously there's a financial implication there. Even if you can get the equipment, somebody has to show you how to use it. I mean, also Roger Walker of Geoscan Research, who has retired now, but he donated an RM15 to me for use with local community groups, and Mike Haken has an RM15. So as do yourself, Pan, you have a resistivity meter. So these things are available, but it's getting them to the people and then training them to use them so that they're confident. I think that's the problem, or both problems.
There's a comment from Alison Spencer from FWAP, who would just like to thank you for all your help and support that's enabled their group to flourish.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Alison.
Another question: what size group do you find is best for teaching?
That's a good question. You can actually train quite a large group, but I think in terms of actual physical work, you don't really want more than 6, depending on what you're doing. So if you're using the cart, 4 to 6 is enough, because only one person can actually use the cart at any one time. So the logistics of it is, once you've learned how to do it, you get a good group of people there, but one person is pushing it up and down, and the rest of you are sitting around chatting, and then you swap over. And so we tend to take a load of chairs out, sit around having a good old chin wag while somebody's doing the hard work, and then we swap over. If you're using the FMs, it's more labor intensive. You have to have somebody moving the ropes and somebody setting out the next grid, and so you can utilize more people that way. And if you've got two, you can have two groups doing that. Resistivity is, again, only one person can be moving it, but you need people moving ropes and setting up grids. So you can use more people, but more than 6 or 7 is probably, I would say that's about enough. Although if it was a training day, you could probably do a lot more, but actually doing the work, 10 is too many.
Right. A question saying, have you combined resistance and magnetometry from results with results from drones and infrared photography, such as Tony Hunt does?
Certainly have. I did my MSc on it back in 2008. Multispectral imagery, GPR, resistivity, everything you can throw at it. I think what the discovery was, and I think what Tony is doing is it tends to be, it's an NVDI, which is a normalized vegetation index thing, which is looking at the infrared, which is infrared divided by red, multiplied by red, divided by infrared. I think I might be wrong in that. Could be the other way around. But what we did find, or what I found, was that the more things you throw at it, the more you get results. So the more complementary they are. They quite often show you different things in the same field. Sometimes they confirm one. So one thing is there in all of them, and then some of them will only appear in the magnetics, some only in the aerial photography, some only in the infrared or the thermal. And so if you can do them all, so much more. I've just seen Unity writing there. Yes, I remember you at Kildale. It was cold. Yeah, it was. Yes. Yeah, so it's absolutely correct. The more things you can actually use, the better chance you have of finding all that's there. But one, I haven't shown you this slide. There are other ones that you can do magnetics, and even when you get a good result, if you strip it all away, take all the topsoil off, almost certainly you've only found 50% of what's there. And often you find less than that. So there's always more under there than you can find using these methods, because there's always going to be some things that aren't detectable. Like, for instance, graves are not detectable generally because you dig a hole, you stick your person in it, and you fill it straight back in again with the same stuff that came out of it. And within 3 months, that's indistinguishable from what's around it. And so archaeology is always going to test us. And so we always have to try and find new methods.
Well, there's another compliment from Hannah Brown from Magnitude. She also wants to say thanks for a great talk and sharing fantastic results. She's very envious, she says.
Yeah.
So, they did the Thornton-le-Street survey.
Yeah, I know they did. Yes, and she's given a talk as well, I believe. So thank you, Hannah.
Well, what do you see as the next advance for magnetometry?
Well, you see, this is the thing. There has actually been no advance. The first magnetometer survey was done in this country in 1958 at a place called Water Newton. And they were looking for Roman kilns, because they fired above a certain point, become permanent magnets. So they weren't actually looking to find all the stuff that we do, but what they did notice even then was they were picking up these funny little lines as well as the kilns. And then they realized it was the magnetic susceptibility of the things that were filling the ditches. I don't want to get too technical, but the difference between those early ones and those were proton magnetometers. I should say there's probably about 5 different types of magnetometer, but the workhorse of what we use is the flux gate gradiometer. There are some cesium magnetometers that are in use in this country. If people are interested, I'll tell them the difference. One looks at the total field, which is including the Earth's magnetic field. The other one is set up on a local sort of magnetic grid. But since Roger first started producing these things, late 70s and the early 80s, the fluxgate radiometers have remained the same. The only difference is now, instead of walking up and down with one, so when I started, we had one we used to hold in our hand, walk up and down in grids, and we'd collect 4 points per meter. Now we have carts that have with 5 of them on, and we're walking up and down collecting swathes of data at higher resolutions. And so the resolution of the data has increased. And that is, in essence, though, the flux gates are very similar. So there has been no advance in terms of what they do. They can be more subtle. So they gather data in nanotesla, but Rogers used to do it in 0.1 nanotesla, and some of the modern ones still do, like the census probe. So in essence, it doesn't have to go anywhere. We just need to get more and more of them together and do higher resolution stuff, because they're pretty much at their limit.
Right, so you see that the advances have been, well, GPS, that you don't have to do grids anymore. And what's the next advance from quad bikes for towing them?
Well, that's already been done. The Germans have done it. They're not only quad bikes, but Land Rovers. They have arrays of 25 sensors that they pull along. So the Wolfgang Neubauer at the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute, they developed these systems where you could put 25 or more in an array behind them and tow them. They also developed GPR antennae that had sort of 20 in an array. So you collect very high resolution data, again, pulling it with a quad bike. The French developed resistivity methods quite a long time ago, 20 years ago now, where you could pull them with a quad bike. And so that was Michel Dabat, for those that are interested. And I was lucky enough to be able to drive it. And it had a GPS on it, and it showed you where you were going. It was amazing all those years ago. So these things are not actually new. They're just very expensive. And so that is the rub. Most local community groups cannot begin to imagine how to raise the money to get one of those in their hands, nor can I, to be fair.
Well, how would people get involved with the geophysical survey, would you suggest?
That's quite difficult now, because apart from, I don't know how many other people do sort of training for local community groups, other than Mike and his Roman Roads Research Association. It's quite rare. Some of the other commercial companies will do that, but I think in my levels of success, I think mostly what happens there is that the commercial groups will come and do the survey for you, but you're not actually involved. Or you're there, you're watching them, or you're helping them, but you're not learning to do it. They're doing the work. And so I think that's why most local community groups have gone down the resistivity route, because it's cheaper to buy one of those, and it's not, magnetometry can be finicky. There are far more things that can go wrong collecting data for a magnetic survey than can for a resistivity survey, for instance. Although things can go wrong for that as well, because I've managed to do it for both. But how to get involved, I think you've just got to look around and see, or write to your local, the people who do it. There are a lot of commercial companies now that do geophysical work, and some of them, like Magnitude, are interested in doing community work. So you just need to find one that's willing to come and give you some time.
And is there anything, this is the last question, is there anything I can do if I'm physically unable to walk up and down in a field? There
certainly is. And this is a thing that I'm very sort of passionate about. We have Google Earth, we have all sorts of things now. And we have free GIS systems like QGIS. We could be getting all of the aerial photographs, all the stuff that's on Google that's not on the National Mapping Program. Local community groups could be doing that. You don't have to move out of your house to do that, but you just need a bit of training so that I mean, interpretation, I have to say, is the dark art of geophysics and aerial photography, because here a little knowledge is certainly a dangerous thing. As you can see, that Roman fort was not a Roman fort, and that is quite common. And the most common thing for people who are doing interpretation for the first time, the most common thing for them to get wrong is to over-interpret. So they would be looking at a field that I look at, and I can see 20 things, and they'll see 50, because a lot of it is geology, a lot of it is other things that your eye has to be trained to spot the things. And there is someone doing a PhD in Glasgow, I believe, who's looking at artificial intelligence to try and pick out the anomalies or the aerial photographs to look at for crop marks. But it's very difficult. So far, as far as I'm aware, the human eye is still the best bit, because we can see differences. We can see a line even though it changes in color, and computers don't like that. They like it to be the same. So training in interpretation, then people who can't get out and do all that walking could be sitting in there and digitizing the crop marks. And I know from looking at Google, there are hundreds and hundreds of fields more now than was. So the NMPs, the National Mapping Program, for those of you not aware, are something that English Heritage, or Historic England as it is now, set up many years ago to try and get all of the crop marks in England on maps. But the problem is that every year more of them happen. So once the NMP is finished, they have to keep going back over, flying over and over again. Now, with drones, with satellites, with Google, that can be done from your chair. So you could be adding to that. So I think there are plenty people could do if they can't do the physical work. Yeah.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you very much, James. I'll hand over to Bill to wrap up.
Hi again, James. Thank you. Brilliant. I really enjoyed that, because we can apply so much of it to us here in Thornton-le-Street, and we'll be looking at our survey again and just seeing exactly what we can see, given what you
or do a bigger survey, Bill.
Well, there is that possibility. Actually, we have other areas where we could extend the survey to, and I think that we probably will try and tackle that, providing I can get landowner permission. But I think because it's intrusive, I think we might manage to do it, and part of it is outside of the scheduled area, which will probably make it just again that little bit easier. Anyway, thank you. It went really well, really pleased. I know we had a little bit of a technical issue at the beginning, but all sorted now, and I do hope that everybody enjoyed James' presentation. Feedback as always, please, good, bad, ugly, or whatever, we would like it, and then we'll pass it on. And if there's anything that you would like us to be talking about, let us know, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, I'm going to plug our book again. I nearly always do this. £5, £6.50 with post and packing. Quite a good read. Also, again, we still have a few copies of Chris Gerard's book, Lost Lives, New Voices, about the soldiers taken at the Battle of Dunbar and what happened to them in Durham, 1650. There is a link with our next presenter in this book as well. So there you are, another tempter. And again, I'm going to mention these books by Cassandra Clark. These are fiction books, they're historical novels, but they're brilliant. A real super read about medieval times. Rush out and buy them. Okay, enough of that. Right. Well, our lottery funding has ended. We've spent the money again. So if you are able to make a donation, that would be fantastic. You don't have to, but we welcome any donation. And thank you very much to those people that have donated. But I'll give you our bank account details just in case you feel that you can. So it's Thornton-le-Street History Group. That's the account name. The sort code is 206146. And the account number is 034298881. Okay, sort code 206146, account number 034298881. Right, okay, moving on. Next webinar, Thursday, the 13th of May, with Professor Caroline Wilkinson. Sorry about that. And Caroline is going to talk to us about forensic facial reconstruction. Now, this really is quite exciting, and we're really pleased to have got Caroline to do this for us. So let's have as many people as possible signed up. So spread the word, please. Spread the word, because I'm certain you will all enjoy it. So until then, keep safe and well. Look after yourselves. Have a beer if you can, but only outside and nice and safely. So as I say again, do keep safe and well. Good night.